The screaming stopped at exactly 3:17 a.m. Marcus Chen had been monitoring the underground surveillance feeds for 3 years, but he'd never heard anything like the sound that had been echoing through the storm drain tunnels for the past 14 minutes. It wasn't human, couldn't be human yet. It carried a desperate pleading quality that made his skin crawl and his hands shake as he reached for the emergency protocol manual. The feed from Camera 7, positioned deep beneath the intersection of 5th and Madison, showed nothing but darkness now. But moments before the screaming ceased, something had moved across the frame. Something large, wet, and wrong. Something that seemed to flow rather than walk, leaving behind a trail that glistened under the infrared lighting like fresh blood mixed with motor oil. Marcus's radio crackled to life. "Control, this is Unit 23. We've got another missing person report. College kid last seen near the storm drain entrance on 5th Street around midnight." The voice belonged to Officer Rodriguez, and even through the static, Marcus could hear the strain in her tone. This was the 4th disappearance this month. The 4th person who had simply vanished near a sewer entrance. His fingers hovered over the red emergency button, the one that would seal every storm drain, every sewer access point, every underground tunnel in the city. The one he'd been told to press only if containment was compromised. But containment of what? In 3 years of monitoring these feeds, watching for unusual activity, Marcus had never been told what exactly they were protecting the city from. Until now. Welcome back to another terrifying true story that will make you question what lurks beneath your feet every day. I'm sharing this because you need to know you have a right to know. Before we dive in, let me ask, where are you watching this from? Are you somewhere safe? Hit that like button if you're brave enough to hear the truth, and subscribe, because after tonight you'll understand why some stories need to be told. Comment below if you think you could handle what Marcus discovered in those tunnels. Trust me, you can't. Marcus Chen had never planned on becoming the night watchman for the city's Environmental Monitoring Division. The job posting had been vague, something about underground infrastructure surveillance, with excellent benefits and minimal public interaction required. After losing his previous job as a security guard at the mall, Marcus needed steady income and didn't ask too many questions about why the city needed someone to watch empty tunnel footage for 12 hours straight. The monitoring station was located in the basement of City Hall, 3 floors below street level. It was a cramped room filled with dozens of screens showing feeds from cameras positioned throughout the city's extensive storm drain and sewer system. The setup seemed excessive for simple infrastructure monitoring, but the pay was good, and Marcus appreciated the solitude. His supervisor, a nervous man named Dr. Harrison, had given him a brief orientation on his first day. "Your job is simple," Harrison had explained, avoiding eye contact. "Watch the feeds. If you see anything unusual, and I mean anything, you call me immediately. You also have access to emergency protocols, but those are only for extreme situations." He'd handed Marcus a thick manual with a red cover labeled Containment Procedures, and warned him to familiarize himself with it completely. The city's underground network was more extensive than Marcus had imagined. Miles of tunnels, some dating back to the early 1900s, connected beneath the streets. Most were standard storm drains and sewer lines, but some passages seemed to lead deeper into sections that didn't appear on any city maps he could find. Those deeper tunnels always remained dark on the feeds, as if the cameras there had been deliberately disabled. During his first few weeks, Marcus had noticed odd things in the surveillance footage. Shadows that moved against the flow of water. Sounds picked up by the audio feeds that didn't match anything he recognized. Wet sliding noises that seemed too large to be rats or other typical sewer dwellers. Sometimes the cameras would shake slightly, as if something heavy was moving through nearby tunnels. The most unsettling part of the job was the missing person reports. Dr. Harrison had explained that the Environmental Monitoring Division worked closely with the police department to track individuals who might have entered the storm drain system. "People fall in, get lost, sometimes worse," Harrison had said. "We help locate them when possible." But Marcus noticed that the missing person reports always followed the same pattern: someone last seen near a storm drain entrance, usually at night, never found. Marcus had started keeping his own log of unusual incidents. Camera malfunctions that seemed to coincide with the missing person reports. Audio anomalies that preceded each disappearance by exactly 3 days, And the smell, even 3 floors underground, sometimes a putrid organic odor would seep into the monitoring room strong enough to make him gag. He'd tried asking Dr. Harrison about these patterns, but his supervisor would only say that the underground ecosystem can be unpredictable and remind Marcus to focus on following protocols rather than asking questions. Tonight felt different though. The screens had been flickering more than usual, and that smell had been getting stronger all week. Marcus checked his watch, 2:47 a.m. Usually the tunnels were completely quiet at this hour, but tonight something was stirring in the depths below. The first sign of trouble came through camera 12, positioned in the main storm drain beneath Central Avenue. Marcus was reviewing his incident log when movement on the screen caught his attention. At first, he thought it might be debris carried by the water flow, but as he leaned closer to the monitor, he realized something was moving upstream against the current. The infrared feed showed a large mass roughly the size of a person, but its movement was all wrong. It seemed to undulate as it progressed through the tunnel, sometimes appearing to separate into multiple smaller shapes before reforming into a single entity. Marcus adjusted the camera angle and increased the zoom, trying to get a clearer image. What he saw made his blood run cold. The mass wasn't debris or even a person, it was something organic, but unlike anything he'd encountered in 3 years of monitoring. Its surface glistened with a wet, oily sheen, and it moved with a fluid, purposeful motion that suggested intelligence. As it passed directly under the camera, Marcus caught a glimpse of what might have been faces, human faces, pressed against its surface from within, mouths open in silent screams. He grabbed his radio with trembling hands. "Dr. Harrison, this is Control. I need you down here immediately. We have a Code Yellow situation in Tunnel 12. Code Yellow was the designation for unidentified biological activity, something Dr. Harrison had mentioned during orientation but never explained in detail. "Are you certain it's a Code Yellow, Marcus?" Dr. Harrison's voice came through the radio, sharp with concern. "Double-check your observations. False alarms result in very expensive response protocols." Marcus looked back at the screen. The entity had moved beyond camera 12's range, but now camera 15 was picking up movement. The mass had somehow increased in size, and its movement had become more agitated, more violent. As it passed under the next camera, Marcus saw something that made him question his sanity. A human arm, recognizable by its clothing, was protruding from the entity's surface, grasping desperately at the tunnel walls. "It's definitely Code Yellow," Marcus said into the radio. "Maybe Code Orange. There's something down here, and it's got someone inside it." The radio remained silent for several long seconds before Dr. Harrison's voice returned, now careful and measured. "Marcus, I need you to initiate Containment Protocol 3. Seal tunnels 10 through 18 immediately. Do not, and I cannot stress this enough, do not attempt to track the entity beyond that zone. I'm on my way down." Marcus turned to the containment controls, a series of switches that would activate emergency barriers throughout the tunnel system. He'd been trained on these systems, but had never used them. As his hand hovered over the switches, camera 16 activated automatically, and what he saw made him freeze. The entity had stopped directly under the camera and was looking up. Marcus could see it clearly now, a writhing mass of organic matter roughly 10 feet in length, with dozens of human limbs and faces visible beneath its translucent surface. But the most horrifying detail was its eyes. Not the eyes of its victims, but its own eyes, large, intelligent, and unmistakably aware that it was being watched. As Marcus stared at the screen, the entity began to change shape. Its mass elongated, and suddenly a fully formed human torso emerged from its top half. The torso belonged to a young man, maybe college-aged, wearing a torn jacket that Marcus recognized from one of last week's missing person reports. The young man's mouth opened, and Marcus heard the sound that would haunt him for the rest of his life, a wet, gurgling plea for help that seemed to come from the creature itself rather than its victim. "Please," the voice echoed through the tunnel's audio feed. "It's still eating. Can't die. Won't let me." Marcus slammed his hand down on the containment switches. Throughout the tunnel system, emergency barriers began to activate, sealing off the contaminated zone. But as the barriers lowered, Marcus noticed something that made his heart sink. The entity wasn't trapped. On camera 14, he could see it flowing like liquid through gaps in the barrier system, reforming on the other side. The radio crackled. "Marcus, what's the status on containment?" "The barriers aren't working," Marcus replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's getting through. It's heading toward the surface drains." "Impossible. Those barriers are designed to contain anything up to Code Red level threats." Marcus watched in horror as the entity approached a vertical shaft that led directly to a storm drain on 5th Street. The same storm drain where the college student had disappeared. The same drain that was only 6 blocks from the university dormitories. "Dr. Harrison," Marcus said into the radio, "you need to tell me what that thing is. You need to tell me right now." The silence that followed stretched for nearly a minute. When Dr. Harrison finally responded, his voice was barely audible. "It's what's left of everyone who's gone missing over the past 15 years, Marcus. And it's hungry. It's always hungry." On the screen, the entity had begun climbing the vertical shaft toward the surface. Marcus could see its form changing again, condensing into a more human-like shape as it approached street level. In less than 5 minutes, it would emerge from the storm drain directly into the heart of the city's nightlife district. Marcus reached for the emergency protocol manual, flipping to the section marked Code Red, Surface Breach Imminent. What he read made his hands shake so violently he could barely hold the book. Code Red protocol required the immediate evacuation of a 6-block radius and the deployment of what the manual referred to as biological containment units, specialized teams trained to handle what the manual euphemistically called aggregated human biomass events. This wasn't the first time. This had happened before. Marcus grabbed the red emergency phone that connected directly to what the manual referred to as Special Operations Command. As he dialed the number, he realized that his job hadn't been about monitoring infrastructure at all. He was an early warning system for something the city had been dealing with for years, something they'd been keeping secret from the public, something that was about to reach the surface. The emergency phone rang only once before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Special Operations Command, this is Director Walsh. Confirm your identity and situation status." "This is Marcus Chen, Environmental Monitor Station 7. Code Red Protocol, possible surface breach in progress. Entity has bypassed containment barriers and is ascending through vertical access shaft beneath 5th and Madison intersection." "Understood. Biological containment units are mobilizing. Maintain visual contact with the entity and provide continuous updates. Under no circumstances are you to leave your post or attempt surface contact until containment is achieved." Marcus kept his eyes locked on camera 8, which monitored the storm drain grate at street level. The feed showed the typical late-night scene: a few pedestrians walking past, unaware that something unspeakable was rising toward them from below. In the distance, he could see the neon lights of Tommy's Bar, where college students often gathered after evening classes. "Director Walsh," Marcus said, "there are civilians in the immediate area. Shouldn't we be evacuating? Evacuation protocols are already in motion. Trust the system, Mr. Chen." But as Marcus watched the street camera, he saw no signs of evacuation. No police barriers, no emergency vehicles, nothing to indicate that anyone above ground was even aware of the situation. The few people visible on the street continued their normal activities, completely oblivious to the danger rising beneath their feet. The entity had reached the final section of the vertical shaft. Through Camera 8's underground angle, Marcus could see its mass pressed against the storm drain grate, testing the metal barriers. The grate was standard municipal installation designed to keep debris out, not to keep something in. As Marcus watched, the entity began to change its consistency, becoming more liquid, seeping through the gaps in the metalwork. On the surface camera, Marcus saw the first indication of the breach: a dark, viscous substance beginning to pool around the edges of the storm drain. A young woman walking her dog stopped and stared at the growing puddle, clearly confused by what she was seeing. "Surface breach confirmed," Marcus reported into the emergency phone. "Entity is emerging at street level. We have a civilian in immediate proximity. Biological containment units are 30 seconds out. Maintain observation." Marcus watched in horror as the dark substance continued to flow from the storm drain, rapidly forming into a more recognizable shape. The entity was reconstituting itself, but it was doing so strategically, creating the appearance of a person who had fallen or been injured. The young woman with the dog approached, clearly intending to help what she perceived as someone in distress. "No, no, no," Marcus whispered frantically, adjusting camera angles to keep the scene in view. "There's someone trying to help it. She doesn't know." The entity's transformation was remarkable and terrifying. Within seconds, it had assumed the appearance of a young man identical to the college student whose torso Marcus had seen emerging from its mass earlier. But this wasn't a rescue, this was mimicry. The entity was using its victim's form as bait. The woman bent down toward the apparent victim, and that's when Marcus saw what the entity really was. As she reached out to check for injuries, tendrils of the dark substance shot up from the ground around the storm drain, moving faster than anything human could react to. They wrapped around her legs, her arms pulling her down toward the drain opening. Her dog began barking, frantically running in circles, but the sound seemed muffled on the audio feed, as if something was dampening the noise. Marcus realized with growing dread that the entity wasn't just hunting, it was actively suppressing evidence of its presence. "We have civilian contact," Marcus shouted into the emergency phone. "The entity has engaged a woman and her dog. Where are the containment units? ETA 15 seconds. Continue observation." But Marcus could see that 15 seconds would be far too late. The woman was being pulled into the storm drain opening, which seemed to be expanding to accommodate her. The entity's mass was flowing back underground, taking its new victim with it. In moments, there would be nothing left on the surface to indicate that anything had happened. Except for the dog. The small terrier was still barking, running back and forth near the storm drain. As Marcus watched, the entity sent up a single tendril, quick and precise, and the dog's barking stopped abruptly. But instead of pulling the animal underground, the entity seemed to absorb something from it, and then released it. The dog stumbled away, moving in an odd, jerky manner. "Director Walsh," Marcus said, his voice tight with realization. "I think the entity just did something to the dog. It's still alive, but it's moving strangely." "Describe the behavior." Marcus watched as the dog wandered in a seemingly random pattern around the area. But as he observed more carefully, he noticed that its movement wasn't random at all, it was systematic. The dog was moving from person to person among the late-night pedestrians, getting close to each one as if it were scenting them. "It's like the dog is marking targets," Marcus said. "The entity did something to it, and now it's identifying other potential victims." That's when Marcus noticed something that made his blood freeze. The biological containment units that Director Walsh had promised were nowhere to be seen. But what was visible, parked discreetly at both ends of the block, were unmarked white vans. And from those vans, individuals in civilian clothing were emerging, not to contain the entity, but to observe and document. Marcus realized with growing horror that this wasn't a containment operation. It was a feeding operation. The city wasn't trying to stop the entity, they were facilitating it. "Director Walsh," Marcus said carefully, "what exactly are the biological containment units supposed to contain?" The pause before the answer was telling. "The situation, Mr. Chen. They contain the situation." On the street cameras, Marcus watched as the modified dog approached a homeless man sleeping in a doorway. The dog sat next to the man for several seconds, then moved on to a couple walking hand in hand toward the bar district. Again, it sat near them briefly before moving to the next target. Each time the dog made contact, Marcus noticed the people's behavior changed subtly. They became more drawn to the storm drain area, as if something was calling to them. The entity wasn't just hunting randomly, it was coordinating, using the dog as a biological targeting system to identify and mark specific individuals. And based on the systematic way it was working, this wasn't the first time it had employed this method. Marcus pulled up the missing persons database on his secondary computer. As he cross-referenced the dates and locations of disappearances over the past 5 years, a pattern emerged that made him sick to his stomach. The disappearances didn't happen randomly throughout the city. They occurred in clusters, always following the same pattern. A small animal would go missing first, usually a pet that was later found wandering in a disoriented state. Then, over the following weeks, people would begin disappearing from that same area. The entity had been using modified animals as scouts and lures for years, and the city knew about it. Marcus's radio crackled with a new voice, not Dr. Harrison or Director Walsh, but someone he didn't recognize. "Environmental Monitor Chen, this is Dr. Reeves from the Municipal Biology Department. I need you to access File 7 in your containment manual. Authorization code Alpha 77 Delta. With trembling hands, Marcus entered the authorization code. A section of the manual that had previously been locked opened to reveal documents that made him question everything he thought he knew about his job, his city, and the thing lurking in the sewers below. The files contained detailed reports dating back 15 years documenting not just the entity's activities, but the city's response to them. Research notes, feeding schedules, population management strategies. The entity wasn't a threat to be contained, it was a resource to be managed. And Marcus was about to learn exactly what kind of resource it was and why the city was so invested in keeping it fed. Marcus's hands shook as he read through File 7, each page revealing a truth more horrific than the last. The entity wasn't some unknown threat that had emerged from the sewers, it was something the city had deliberately created and maintained for over 15 years. The documents detailed Project Convergence, a municipal program designed to address two of the city's most persistent problems, the growing homeless population and the disposal of untraceable missing persons. The entity, officially designated as Biological Recycling Unit Alpha, had been engineered using a combination of experimental biotechnology and what the files euphemistically called human substrate material. Dr. Reeves's voice came through the radio again, calm and professional. Mr. Chen, I understand this information may be disturbing, but I need you to focus on your immediate responsibilities. The entity has exceeded its feeding quota for this cycle and requires recalibration. Recalibration? Marcus's voice cracked as he spoke. You're talking about people, it's killing people. The individuals being processed were already categorized as municipal liabilities, Dr. Reeves replied. Homeless individuals, undocumented immigrants, people who wouldn't be missed by the broader community. The entity serves a vital public health function by removing these problems while simultaneously disposing of biological waste from our medical facilities. Marcus looked at the street cameras and saw the horrible truth of Dr. Reeves's words. The dog was indeed marking targets, but it wasn't random selection. It was targeting specific individuals based on predetermined criteria. The homeless man in the doorway was first followed by a young woman whose clothing and behavior suggested she might be struggling with addiction. Each person the dog marked fit a profile of someone society had already abandoned. This is murder, Marcus said, but even as he spoke, he realized the full scope of what he was seeing. How many people? How many have been fed to this thing? Approximately 300 individuals over the past 5 years, with processing efficiency improving significantly as the entity has adapted to urban environments. You should be proud, Mr. Chen. Your monitoring has contributed to our most successful population management program in the city's history. On camera 12, Marcus could see the entity had returned to the tunnels, its mass noticeably larger than before. But now he understood why the cameras were really there, not to watch for threats, but to ensure the entity was feeding properly and to track its growth. The city wasn't protecting people from the monster in the sewers. They were protecting the monster from being discovered. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had been complicit in hundreds of murders. Every missing person report he had filed, every unusual activity he had documented, every time he had followed protocol instead of asking questions, he had been facilitating systematic murder. I won't do this anymore, Marcus said, reaching for the master control panel. I'm shutting down the whole system. I'm calling the media, the FBI, someone who will... I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mr. Chen. Dr. Reeves's voice remained maddeningly calm. Please, look at camera 23. Marcus's blood turned to ice as he located camera 23 on his bank of monitors. The camera showed the corridor outside the monitoring station, the corridor he would need to use to leave the building. Standing in that corridor were 3 figures in maintenance uniforms, but their movements were wrong, jerky, and unnatural. As one of them turned toward the camera, Marcus saw its face and nearly vomited. The maintenance worker's eyes were completely black, and when it opened its mouth, Marcus could see that its tongue had been replaced with the same dark, writhing substance he'd been watching in the tunnels. These weren't city employees, they were people who had been partially processed by the entity, kept alive, but modified to serve as guardians and cleanup crew. The entity doesn't just consume, Mr. Chen, Dr. Reeves explained. It converts. Those 3 individuals were homeless persons who were processed approximately 6 months ago. They retain enough human function to perform simple tasks, but their loyalty to the entity and by extension to the program is absolute. Marcus backed away from the monitors, his mind racing. He was trapped 3 floors underground with no way to escape except through corridors patrolled by things that had once been human. But worse than his immediate danger was the knowledge that this horror would continue. Tomorrow night, the entity would emerge again and more people would disappear into its mass, and the city would continue to function as if nothing had happened. Why? Marcus asked. Why create something like this? Efficiency, Dr. Reeves replied. Traditional methods of population control are expensive, legally complicated, and often ineffective. The entity provides a sustainable, cost-effective solution to multiple municipal challenges. No trials, no prison costs, no ongoing social services expenses. The processed individuals contribute to the entity's growth and intelligence, which in turn makes it more effective at identifying and eliminating future problems. Marcus looked at the containment manual still open on his desk. The final pages contained something he hadn't noticed before: detailed instructions for Monitor Transition Protocol. He read through the steps with growing horror, realizing that his discovery of the truth wasn't an accident. It was part of the program. "You're going to feed me to it too," Marcus whispered. "Only partially," Dr. Reeves said. "Your experience and knowledge make you too valuable for complete processing. You'll join our monitoring team permanently. After conversion, you'll find the work much more fulfilling." Outside the monitoring room, Marcus could hear footsteps in the corridor. The converted guardians were approaching. He had perhaps 3 minutes before they reached him. 3 minutes to find a way to expose the truth and destroy the entity that the city had been feeding for 15 years. 3 minutes to save himself and prevent countless future murders. The footsteps were getting closer. Marcus's 3 years of security training kicked in as he heard the converted guardians approaching. His mind raced through his options. The monitoring station had only one entrance, but it was connected to the building's emergency systems. If he could trigger a fire alarm, the building's automated systems would unlock all exits and summon emergency responders, witnesses who might not be part of the conspiracy. He pulled out his emergency phone and quickly photographed the most damaging pages of File 7, sending them to his personal email account with an automated delay. If he didn't cancel the emails within 6 hours, they would be forwarded to every major news outlet and law enforcement agency in the state. The footsteps stopped just outside the monitoring room door. Through the security camera, Marcus could see the 3 converted guardians standing motionless as if waiting for instructions. "Mr. Chen," Dr. Reeves's voice came through the radio. "Please open the door." The conversion process is relatively painless, and you'll retain most of your memories and personality. Many of our converted personnel report a profound sense of peace and purpose. Marcus ignored the radio and focused on the fire suppression controls. The monitoring station's sensitive electronic equipment required a specialized suppression system that would flood the room with halon gas that would also trigger building-wide evacuation protocols. He pulled the manual release, and immediately alarms began blaring throughout the building. As the halon gas began hissing from the ceiling vents, Marcus grabbed his backup radio and switched to the emergency frequency used by the fire department. "This is Environmental Monitor Chen at City Hall. I have critical information about multiple murders connected to city officials. The building is being evacuated due to fire suppression activation. I need police protection immediately." The converted guardians began pounding on the door, but the halon gas was designed to prevent fires by displacing oxygen. Even if they broke through, they would be operating in an atmosphere that would impair their function. Through the chaos of alarms and gas, Marcus heard something that gave him hope. Sirens approaching the building. Real emergency responders, people who weren't part of the conspiracy, were coming. Dr. Reeves's voice crackled through the radio one final time. "You're making a serious mistake, Mr. Chen. The entity serves a vital function. Without population management, the city would be overrun with undesirable elements. You're about to destroy 15 years of careful planning." "Good," Marcus replied, though his voice was muffled by the emergency respirator he'd pulled from the wall. "Some things should be destroyed." As the halon gas reached full concentration, the pounding on the door stopped. Marcus checked the underground cameras one last time and saw something that gave him a grim satisfaction. The entity in the tunnels was writhing violently, apparently in distress. The documentation had mentioned that it maintained some kind of connection to its converted guardians. Their incapacitation was causing it pain. Through the monitoring room's small window, Marcus could see flashlights in the corridor. Real firefighters and police officers were moving through the building following evacuation protocols that couldn't be overridden by whatever authority Dr. Reeves represented. Marcus had survived the immediate threat, and more importantly, he had evidence. The emails would send automatically exposing the conspiracy to the world. But as he watched the underground cameras, he realized that his victory might be temporary. The entity was already moving, retreating deeper into the tunnel system where the cameras couldn't follow. It was going to hide to wait to find a new hunting ground in another city, where no one would be watching for it. The nightmare was far from over. 6 months later, Marcus Chen sat in a federal witness protection facility reviewing newspaper clippings from around the country. The story he had exposed had made international headlines: city officials orchestrated serial killings, biological weapon used for population control, hundreds missing in municipal murder scheme. The conspiracy had been unraveled completely with Dr. Reeves and dozens of city officials arrested and awaiting trial. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The newspaper articles all focused on the human conspirators, the corrupt officials, the illegal experiments, the cover-up. But there was almost no mention of the entity itself. The few references described it as an experimental biological weapon that was safely contained and destroyed after the underground tunnels were flooded with industrial bleach and sealed permanently. Marcus knew better. He had seen the creature's intelligence, its adaptability. Industrial bleach wouldn't have killed something that had been feeding and evolving for 15 years. And the tunnels hadn't been sealed. He had checked satellite images. The entrances had been covered, but satellite thermal imaging showed that the underground waterways were still active. His suspicions were confirmed when Agent Sarah Mills, his FBI contact, visited with the latest updates on the case. She seemed nervous, avoiding eye contact as she delivered what should have been good news. "We've made significant progress," she said, placing a file on the table between them. "Dr. Reeves has agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's providing details about similar programs in other cities." Marcus opened the file and felt his blood run cold. The list contained 17 major metropolitan areas across the United States. Each had experienced patterns of missing persons that matched what Marcus had witnessed in his city. Each had environmental monitoring divisions, with nearly identical setups to the one where Marcus had worked. "Other cities," Marcus repeated slowly. "You're telling me this wasn't an isolated incident?" Agent Mills shifted uncomfortably. "According to Dr. Reeves, Project Convergence was a pilot program that was successful beyond expectations. The technology was replicated in multiple urban centers over the past decade." Marcus studied the agent's face and realized something that made his stomach drop. "You already knew about the other cities, didn't you? This wasn't news to you. Mr. Chen, how long have federal agencies known about this? How long has the government been aware that cities across America have been feeding people to biological weapons?" Agent Mills was quiet for a long moment before responding. "The Department of Homeland Security has been monitoring urban population management experiments since 2010. Initially, these programs were considered innovative approaches to dealing with the homeless crisis and urban decay. When we discovered the biological component, it was deemed too politically sensitive to expose immediately." Marcus stood up from his chair, backing toward the window. "You're part of it. The federal government is part of this conspiracy." "Not part of it," Agent Mills corrected. "We're managing it. The entities cannot be destroyed, Mr. Chen. They're too evolved, too intelligent. But they can be controlled, contained, and directed toward acceptable targets. Your exposure of the municipal conspiracy was actually helpful. It allowed us to bring the program under direct federal oversight." Outside the window, Marcus could see the small town where the witness protection facility was located. Peaceful quiet, with a low population of people who wouldn't be missed if they disappeared. People like him. "This facility," Marcus said quietly. "It's not protection, is it?" Agent Mills reached for her radio. "I'm sorry, Marcus. You know too much, and you've proven you can't be trusted to remain quiet. But your knowledge and experience make you valuable. After your processing is complete, you'll be able to help us monitor the entities more effectively." Through the basement window, Marcus could see movement in the storm drain that ran beneath the facility. Something large and wet was moving through the underground tunnels approaching from the direction of the nearest city. The entity hadn't been destroyed. It had simply been relocated, and Marcus had been delivered to it like a carefully wrapped gift. As Agent Mills called for backup, Marcus realized that his escape from the monitoring station 6 months ago hadn't been a victory at all. It had been part of the plan. They had needed him to expose the municipal program so they could replace it with something far more extensive and efficient. Something that operated on a national scale with full federal support. The knocking on his door wasn't backup arriving to help Agent Mills. It was something else entirely, and it had been waiting for him all along. The screaming began at exactly 3:17 p.m.